Well, here we are. The FIA were not bluffing. Those new penalties they introduced a few weeks ago, they've actually been enforced. It's actually happened. And yet again, the FIA president hoped to deflect, but failed miserably. Oh, and by the way, Alex Albon, you might be in danger for what you just said. The brand new penalties aimed at combating swearing within motorsports under the governance of the FIA have been used for the first time, but not in Formula 1. Instead, it's the old haunt and stomping grounds of the FIA president Mohammed bin Sulayem. The World Rally Championship has had that distinctive, honour. In the case of the driver Adrien Formaux, representing Hyundai's 16 car, being dunked for swearing, falling under the Article 12.2.1.L's grounds for any sort of misconduct, which in this case includes cussing. Formaux received a €10,000 fine from the stewards for his first offence, with a 3 times multiplier applied due to WRC's Tier 3 status, according to the appendix. However, the stewards decided to be a little bit generous. How sweet of them. And have suspended the additional multiplier for a period of 12 months, so you better not do that again, Adrien, or we might enforce that plus an additional fine. And then, of course, that 1-month suspension dealie. Suspended. Suspense, right? Whoa, suspenseful. In any case, it's begun. Not only for the fact that this whole debate regarding driver swearing is continuing at pace, but now this is the first time that infamous Appendix B from late January has been mentioned in an official FIA stewards document. It's all been clarified, it's all been made clear, instead of just vague mentions about swearing and arbitrary fines that we got last year from Max Verstappen and then Charles Leclerc. And what I found really curious is that some people have only just now noticed, as my original post from yesterday only gained traction this morning. What was going on yesterday? Oh, well, maybe there might have been the Daytona 500 going on for starters. And then, of course, the FIA president was talking about the idea of a 12th team being a reality, and it ideally coming from China. Yeah, I could imagine that he hoped that would have been enough of a deflection to just go, look over there at these controversial statements and this really prestigious race. Don't pay attention to the stewards document. But no, it's happened. It's right here. This document right here from the stewards from Rally Sweden this past weekend enacted their right to bring Adrien Formaux and his co-driver Alexander Correa to task for comments made after the round's power stage, where Formaux commented that we foxtrotted up yesterday. Sorry, I can't mention the proper word because, come on, it's YouTube and I got a kid to feed now. And despite Formaux defending to the stewards upon his summoning that he wasn't targeting anybody or anything in a malicious way, and that it was said in a colloquial and descriptive way, the overseers still imposed the penalty, albeit with some degree of leniency. This is what the stewards had to say as to the justification of this punishment. Ahem. The stewards and the FIA acknowledge that the words in question have unfortunately become common colloquialisms. However, it is essential to emphasize that this does not diminish the fact that such language is widely regarded as profanity, and it's inappropriate in public discourse, including live televisual broadcasts. Public platforms are not solely intended for audiences familiar with these colloquialisms, but also reach diverse cultures and individuals who may find such words offensive. You get the idea. This is basically boiling down to the old adage of, won't somebody please think of the children? But the reality is that what was said last year and with Appendix B has become a proper threat, which has had a real use case in the wild. And for anyone who wasn't a Formula 1 driver thinking they would get off scot-free and not be paid attention to, think again. Any driver who races in a series which is governed by the FIA, you could be a target. But I think this still boils down to what that original GPDA letter said. Are all of these actions by putting monetary fines on swearing really necessary? Is this really going to fix the problem? Or is it just going to drive a wedge where we might even see a driver's strike? The first notion of this ilk since arguably 2005 Indy GP, where most of the Michelin-clad drivers, well, in fact, all of them, just completely went into the pit lane. They didn't start the race. That's the closest example. Then back in the 80s, drivers were considering strike action. Yeah, might we see that this year when it's expected to be the most open championship battle yet? I don't want the championship decided by penalties that were given because a driver said a naughty word. Whoever won that championship because they were squeaky clean, it would be a hollow victory. Mind you, I think maybe some teams and drivers might not mind that, a win's a win. But Whether these stringent regulations are necessary to preserve a professional image in a global sport is the central topic here. One side of the argument involves the FIA's claim that it has a duty to maintain a code of conduct in all public forums due to the millions of viewers it has, including families and children. Because according to the FIA, drivers should set a good example by controlling their language during official events and press conferences so that the sport can maintain its respectability around the world. And the reality here is that maybe the FIA has a point, because there are other international organizations, say like the NFL and of course the International Olympic Committee. According to their documentation, they have similar restrictions set upon their athletes, that they are meant to conduct themselves in a proper manner. So maybe the FIA could argue that, hey, we're only bringing ourselves into line with all of these other international sporting organizations which have a global appeal, so get off our backs, all right? Well, I mean, we probably would be more in thinking of that regard had you actually been a bit transparent regarding the money, but more on that later. Because many observers, including some of the drivers, in fact, well, all the drivers under the GPDA's watch, think this is too extreme and ignores the fact that racing is a high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled sport. A few strategically placed curse words during a press conference or an angry radio interview, they say, are inevitable in a sport which could be categorized as an extreme sport, considering that, well, you're driving a, carbon fiber tub at 200 miles an hour. That's not everyday convention. And also, as we've seen from the likes of George Russell and Max Verstappen, they view all of this discourse and the curtailing of their language as them being treated like children, and that the subject is childish in its entirety. As we remember, Max Verstappen's most infamous quote is that, "Come on, we're not 5 years old," or something. Okay, I'm not saying it verbatim, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but you get the idea. It's something Max would say. And then the original GPDA document saying, this is meant to be something conducted in a more mature manner. But then this is all completely brought to light and in sharp relief, with Mohammed Ben Sulayem saying at a recent press conference in Jarama, saying that he views all of the drivers under his watch as his own children. And I get why he says that. He wants to look after them with due care, attention, passion and devotion, but also with discipline. Okay, I understand that. You want to have their best interests at heart here. However, the fact is though, what Mr. Sulayem said kind of proved the drivers were right, that they are viewed as children, although with slightly different contexts going on here. But yeah, the argument still rumbles on. But the truth is that everyone's got an opinion about this, about whether or not these rules and penalties are necessary. The conversation is worth having, but the way this is all going about has been incredibly messy, and it's completely glossed over the original concept of, hey, maybe we should just be a little bit more considerate for other people, maybe. It's just, again, money is the root of all evil in this sense. Because many people think that these new rules and fines and possible punishments, they're too severe in relation to the offence that was caused, particularly in light of the sport's notoriously high stakes and emotionally charged nature. And given the present uproar, the FIA may want to reconsider its stance on the delicate balancing act between promoting civility in public and giving drivers the opportunity to show their true emotions while competing, and make Formula One such an enticing prospect to support, follow, and also invest in. Where this should have gone and stayed would have been the FIA president or Stefano Domenicali talking to the drivers in private, all of them, so that means they could all hear, and just go, hey, guys, can you just take it down a notch or two with the swearing in front of the cameras, okay? If we can do that, that'd be great. Yeah, all right. Just friendly banter, a friendly conversation, just asking nicely, hey, can you just temper it down a little bit? That'd be great. Thanks. And that's it. That's all you need to do. Talk to them like adults and keep it civil and chill and calm. You don't have to impose fines in a draconian manner. All this is going to do is rub drivers up the wrong way and just prove that they were right. And undermine yourself, FIA. That's all you're doing. Or is there an ulterior motive here? Keep on watching to find out more, because this is something I'm finding really nefarious. Because there is clearly zero chill in this discussion with the FIA. And given that this whole situation has come in rapid succession, with little discussion with any of the GPDA representatives, then finding out via social media and news reports, really hammers home the reality that the FIA is pulling up the veils and not showing anybody what they're about to do next. And it makes them unpredictable and kind of scary. And again, he's just proving the GPDA right, that there is no discourse, there's nothing going on. Transparency, they hardly know the word. This is the thing. In trying to assert control, there is something wrong here. That something needs to be done to fix this. And all it's going to do, like the GPDA letter said, is bring the sport, the entire concept of motorsport even, into a negative light. All for the fact that Ben Sulayem wants to remind people that they are still owners of the championship. As I said in my video from last week, that's a rather complicated term, and actually mostly inaccurate, because all that the FIA own of Formula One is the name and the basic principles of governance. That's it. And actually, maybe in a way, this could have been a power play, according to one of my followers on Twitter, that maybe this could be a way of a bargaining chip to try and bolster the FIA's coffers by maybe selling all of the people who work for Formula One under the FIA's governance to them. So that means they can make a quick buck because of how popular Formula One is. I'm not sure about that. I'm going to have to bring out the spanner of speculation for that one. It's worth thinking about just as a thought experiment, but I'm not sure they would go that far. So yeah, the speculation, it's quite big here. Heck, I might even get the phone moved out here. I think that might be a little bit too crazy, but, you know, worth thinking about in a way, casually. However, one big point in that original letter, and one that seems to be lingering in the air, is that of the destination of these fines that are generated. Where does the money go? According to the FIA president, they're meant to be helping out promote grassroots initiatives around the world, or motoring clubs in more underprivileged territories. That, or he says it's nobody's beeswax as to where the money goes. And this concern has been raised by one Alex Albon again, albeit extremely carefully. But what I'm about to share with you is all you need to know, that this topic is very much of the interest of all of the F1 drivers, and that we have not seen the end of this. This is going to pop up in 2025. And anyway, this is what Albon had to say. Ahem. There's definitely been discussions about disciplinary action on swearing. We're still ongoing about how we want to set out what we say around it. It's a delicate matter, and of course, do we think it's right? Of course not. I don't think we should be so monetized in every single aspect of what we do. It's a pure adrenaline sport as well. I don't think us walking around with the microphones all the time is whatever. Interesting that he trailed off like that. Maybe he realized that he said too much. This could be understood in various ways. It could imply that maybe he was afraid that he was touching upon a delicate subject, or that he may have been more forthcoming than he intended about his real feelings on the matter of monetization and swearing. Alternatively, this could be just a reflection of how challenging it is to provide a concise summary of such a complex problem in the heat of the moment when being asked a question by a journalist. In any case, this stoppage of his own thoughts and feelings by just simply saying whatever, it's an indication that this is a hot button topic, it's a sensitive subject, and the drivers are still figuring out what their overall stance is on the matter. But it's still a situation which Alex Albon and his close friend George Russell, one of the lead representatives of the GPDA, are still thinking about. And these comments that were made on the FW47 launch came just 48 hours prior to this first imposition of the penalties of Appendix B. So it was a very telling comment, and not long after that, it just brings up the subject about monetization and swearing. Granted, it wasn't fully enforced as per the standard guidelines. Formaux only has to pay a third of the fine immediately. But the truth is that given the wording of the stewards about how the words in question have unfortunately become common colloquialisms, this will be a slow process for all to get used to. And indeed, a short-term revenue stream in that regard. In my honest opinion, I feel like the FIA may be wanting to capitalise on something that has become so intrinsic within the world of motorsport. Them, the stewards, saying that this has become a common colloquialism, that everybody says this all the time, that they may accidentally slip up in the heat of the moment and find themselves with a multiple $1,000 fine or something like that, which goes straight to the FIA. This will take some getting used to in terms of media training to make sure you zip it and that you cannot be heard by anybody who is wearing an FIA badged shirt. So that is going to be a really tricky process to try and tell people, hey, just stop swearing, okay? You might be heard. You know the whole thing that was said back in the day in the 40s, careless talk costs lives? Now it's like careless talk costs fines. All the while, the FIA is not providing clear and transparent information about how the fines are reinvested or used. Well, information that doesn't come with in-specific information, or its president getting a little defensive about it. And Albon's latest comments have raised yet again the question of whether these regulations are really meant to keep things professional, or if they are just an attempt to get more money. And hey, why don't they really put the fire underneath the bums of the drivers? What if what Alex just said is spotted by the FIA, and then he gets the first fine amongst the Formula One contingent. Wait, Law, hang on. You serious? Alex, the nice guy of Formula One, being fined before Max Verstappen for comments made against the FIA? Yeah, they could do that. The stewards are in a position where, come Melbourne in a few weeks' time, they could look at that and then bring Alex Albon to the stewards and ask for an explanation as to those comments, because the FIA may claim that he has violated the provision in Appendix B that addresses causing moral injury or loss to the FIA, its bodies, its members, or its executive officers. When talking about the new guidelines, this part, also called Article 12.2.2.1.f, is meant to punish anything that could be seen as bringing the FIA's authority or reputation into question. Perhaps even subtle diplomatic criticism that does not directly challenge the leadership or policies of the FIA might be considered as breaking these regulations in the high-pressure setting that is Formula One. When, as I have said before in this video, the FIA president has reminded F1 drivers all the time that since they're at the top, they are the ones that set the biggest examples for everybody beneath them. Up-and-coming drivers who hope to reach F1 one day, young children who love Formula One so much that they will follow it for the rest of their days, they are right at the top. And they also carry the biggest fine, since Formula One, according to the FIA, is the only Tier 4 motorsport where they get the full whack. $10,000 for your first offence? Nope, $40,000. So in theory, as I said in previous videos, that GPDA letter, that could net the FIA €800,000 in terms of fines incurred. Nice little money for their kitty. And in truth, if the FIA wanted to issue this fine at the Australian Grand Prix to Albon, they could do that, since any comments according to that appendix have a 2-year review window. So yeah, Alex making these comments not at a Grand Prix a month out, yeah, they are not safe from scrutiny if Ben Sulayem gets a bee in his bonnet. And again, that original GPDA letter could fly in the face of Article 12.2.2.1.0 in terms of general making and display of political, religious and personal statements or comments, notably in violation of the general principle of neutrality. Well, there you go. Slam dunk in theory. Watch this space, my friend. If we get a summons of Alex Albon to the stewards for breaking that regulation and article, it could set off a blaze of comments and just prove the critics right. But is that blaze something the FIA really wants to deal with here? It would bring them into the attention more than ever. Or alternatively, it could really set a precedent and make it clear to Formula One drivers that they mean business, that they are prepared to punish anybody, including Alex Albon. And it would also make an impression because they were saying, you thought we were going to find Max first, huh? Yes, you might be thinking that this is absolutely ridiculous and the FIA wouldn't do something so foolish and reckless. But the fact that we're even considering that they could do that, that just says everything. And speaking of transparency or lack thereof, the FIA's financial management is also under fresh scrutiny, because reports that I touched upon as early as December just bring all of this discourse from Albon about monetization to light. Because back then, 2 important FIA audit committee members were fired not long after raising concerns about a $1.5 million fund established by Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president, because they speculated that internal financial decisions may be shielded from public and stakeholder scrutiny due to the fund's abrupt launch and the subsequent departure of those 2 figures, who voiced the concerns. Now, according to reports from the FIA and Ben Sulayem, this money was supposed to go to underprivileged parts of the world and motoring clubs that needed the funding to be able to function. That was the main reason, as well as certain grassroots investments to make sure that young drivers can get into the sport, including a huge uptick in young girls taking part in karting for the first time, and therefore broadening the pool of potential F1 Academy racers, or maybe candidates for other series across the world, and really continue the momentum which was established by Abby Pulling, dominating F1 Academy, and now taking part in GB3. Who knows, Abby Pulling might get into Formula 3 soon, and I hope so too. But such moves, according to critics, indicate structural problems with the financial governance of the FIA, as does the significant departure of top officials in the past few months, irrespective of financial departments. And considering there is the matter of the upcoming FIA presidential election, where Ben Sulayem is seeking a second term of office, could this fund be actually a means to entice less prominent motoring clubs to vote for Mr. Sulayem, since in their minds he'd be looking out for them and their organisations instead of prioritising the bigger and more self-sufficient ones? Votes can add up, you know. So yes, Appendix B, that was no empty threat. It's been enforced just weeks after it was introduced. And I bet you that Ben Sulayem did not want this to make headlines, that ideally it would be swept under the rug because it wasn't Formula One. It was something that maybe all of the experts within motorsport would have paid attention to, and thusly it wouldn't become a problem for the lower motorsporting organisations. Well, tough Ben Sulayem. The press online is a very tricky thing to try and contain, because ideally it would have been overshadowed by the Daytona 500 or his latest hot takes, trying to deviate and distract by slamming F1's greedy 24 race calendar again and teasing a 12th F1 team, preferably from China, a market that he believes has untapped potential, especially considering since Zhou Guanyu has sustained himself a spot within F1 as a Ferrari reserve driver and potential candidate for a seat with the new Cadillac team. And given the fact that the current geopolitical situation right now about the relationship between the US and China is around, that topic about saying, hey, the next F1 team should come from China because the previous one was from America. America versus China. That would have set people ablaze, especially from the American audiences. So therefore, people wouldn't have paid attention to that WRC steward's decision. Nice try. We paid attention because we are motorsporting geeks. And I'm on a ladder and I've got a bone to pick with you. And yes, it may have been watered down slightly since this is the first time it actually being used in the wild. It's begun though, irrespective of leniency. And as for Alex, I thank you for bringing this to our attention and reminding people about the uncertainty of the intentions of these penalties and really making the FIA out to be really muddy and vague. I hope that we are not hearing news come Thursday before the Australian Grand Prix that you're about to get whacked with a 40,000 euro fine for what you just said. It's just going to ruin the next season's championship, isn't it? And while we're on the subject of control, McLaren's boss just sent a warning shot out. He doubled down on team unity, making it clear, if a driver puts themselves above the team, they won't have a place at McLaren. To find out more about how the team has more control over Norris and Piastri than ever, watch this video next, straight after this one.